Terry Glavin is a tireless reporter who has authored 7 books, won more than a dozen literary and journalism awards. His most recent focus is on Afghanistan, the country, the people, and the struggle for peace. He has supported Canada's combat mission in Afghanistan and is an active member of the Canada-Afghanistan Solidarity Committee, and it is my pleasure to welcome Terry Glavin back to Studio 4 to tell us more. Good morning.
Hi.
Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you, Fanny.
I think last time we were exploring oceans.
Something like that.
You were saving oceans, or telling us why we should save the ocean.
I don't know. It was about the North Pacific. Yeah, it was kind of a human and natural history of the North Pacific Ocean.
What or who led you to Afghanistan?
Yeah, what's a
why?
sweetheart like you doing in a place like this, right?
Exactly.
I didn't actually want to write a book about Afghanistan. That wasn't my plan at all. I was much more interested in what I call Absurdistan, which is the sort of country that occupies our imagination. I figured, you know, my gosh, there's so many books about Afghanistan, there should be some sort of committee, you know? But about 5-6 years ago, I began to talk to a lot of local young Afghans, a lot of Afghan intellectuals, Afghan liberals, journalists. And what I found was, and I've always been drawn to stories where there's a huge sort of a gulf between the real world and the way we understand the world, between a real story and the way the story tends to get told. That's the sort of thing that's always animated me. I like to explore the chasm and wonder why it's there. Never in my career had I encountered such a deep and dark gulf between the reality of a place, a thing, an issue, and the way that place or thing or issue was discussed in the discourse.
In
Absolutely
media,
astonishing.
in
media,
PR releases, in government.
politics, in parliament, in the streets. The Afghanistan that has animated the Canadian imagination doesn't exist.
What does exist today?
What exists is a country of 31 million people, roughly, the overwhelming majority of whom, contrary to what one might imagine, the last poll I saw, 82% support the right of women to equal rights for women, 85% equal rights for women's education. Maybe 4% of the people support the Taliban. All of the Quran burnings, you would think that they're all just a bunch of religious fanatic nutcases who want to kill us. Nothing could be further from the truth. And I'm a prisoner of this knowledge, and it's not just anecdotal. I'm now aware of, I think, 16, 17 public opinion polls, national public opinion polls, focus group surveys, conducted across Afghanistan over the past decade. They're now the most studied people in Central Asia, one of the most studied nations in the world. And the overwhelming majority, they have a hell of a lot more patience with the NATO mission than I would have. Foreign interference is right at the bottom of their worries.
Do they trust the U.S. government?
I don't. I don't know why they would.
You suggested in one of your articles that essentially they're sitting ducks.
Well, yeah. I think the problem is that, and it's, you see, the laws of gravity don't operate differently in Afghanistan. It's pretty normal, actually. I mean, the poverty is just heartbreaking and soul-destroying. And the disaffection, the dislocation, I mean, we really have to remember in 2001, on September 11th, when the skies parted and the world looked back down on Afghanistan, it was Dresden. People have forgotten just how bad it was. And so it has, there has been tremendous and remarkable progress, but in the last 2 or 3 years, regrettably, since the election of Barack Obama, who would have known, the people have become increasingly distrustful of the Americans. There's a tremendous amount of anxiety in the country.
Distrustful of Americans because they feel abandoned, because they know that the Taliban will once again rule, come back, war for nothing, what?
All of those things. The book is not polemics. It's mainly just stories. I mean, I do start out from a kind of a proposition that there is another country out there that we should know about.
A magical country. And
a real country.
Where is that magical country with thinkers and intellectuals?
Sure,
and
journalists and feminists and secularists and reformers, and it's weird. It's interesting. And then, what I do is I do interrogate the sort of archaeology of Absurdistan. I try to inquire into why it is that we imagine Afghanistan as we do. But the one, kind of opinion that I have is that the way we talk about Afghanistan probably matters more and has mattered more to events as they unfold in that country than all the guns and the money that we've sent there since 2001. When Afghans hear, it looks like, when there's an anti-war protest in Toronto, it's on the front page of Hashti Soab, which is a liberal daily in Afghanistan, and everybody goes, oh my God, if the troops pull out, what'll happen? So everybody plans an exit strategy. The women, they're much less likely to stick their necks out. The reformers and the Democrats, less likely to take risks. It fuels the corruption cycle because, might as well get it while the getting's good because this isn't going to last. Puts a spring in the step of all the jihadist whack jobs and Taliban lunatics. And so that it actually means a lot. And in the last 3 years particularly, there's a tremendous amount of anxiety in the country and a tremendous amount of distrust that the Americans are basically going to put a shiv in the ribs of Afghan democracy again.
And if Americans do put a shiv in the ribs, China waiting? Who's waiting?
Well, there you go. China is already there like a dirty shirt. If you look over the last 10 years at the international contribution, the United Nations contribution, the signatories to the Afghan Compact, 68 countries, something like that. 43 countries that are contributing troops to Afghanistan. China has contributed in aid. They've pledged 0.6% of the aid that Afghanistan is getting comes from China. And if you look at the amount of money they've actually spent there, it's probably 0.1% of the aid that has been contributed to Afghanistan comes from China. And what they've done is they've moved in, they're buying up all the mineral leases, they want
the copper?
They got the copper.
They want the minerals?
Yeah.
China.
And they've also the Chinese Communist Party has entered into a full cultural political accord with Jamaat-e-Islami, which is the main Islamic front in Pakistan. Pakistan is the problem. That's the problem that the Americans should have made to go away and didn't.
And many Americans believe that.
And now what the Pakistanis are telling Obama is, you're some country north of Brazil, I believe.
Interesting.
China's got our back now.
And what about Canada? Our role?
Our
ongoing role?
I'm actually quite proud. I'm not afraid to confess of the role that Canada has played in Afghanistan. It's very small, but big in its way for, let's face it, 4 or 5 years, 2,800 soldiers, kept the Taliban at bay, right down there at the pointy end of the stick, the nastiest bit of bandit country between Peshawar and Persepolis. 2,800 of our soldiers did that. And now, the Americans come in with 120,000 troop surge, and they're having a hard time getting the job done. Canadian soldiers are respected in Afghanistan. They are known in Afghanistan. They've helped to open up a lot of democratic space in Afghanistan, and they're well appreciated.
So, if or when the USA abandons the Afghans completely, what should our role be? The Canadian role, in your humble opinion?
Yeah, I'm not a geostrategist or Sun Tzu or anything like that.
I always thought you were.
I don't, I think, I really do regret that Canada has sort of abdicated any role of leadership in NATO on this. When we speak on this issue, people pay attention, people hear what we say.
But we are training still.
Yeah, we've got
training troops.
Yeah, people think that we've
local.
sort of withdrawn from Afghanistan. We haven't. We're still there.
Yes,
seriously
as peacekeepers.
Well, kind of.
Or
yeah,
not.
We're troop trainers. Troop trainers mainly. That's the main function we're performing in Kabul, Mazar-e Sharif, and so on.
Right.
The great fear is that if there is a precipitous withdrawal, the thing will collapse, and the army will just sort of fracture into its ethnic and political and
Of course, but the idea is if
things.
we make your soldiers strong, if the
That's
infrastructure
pretty well, right now,
builds
in the
up,
absence of anything else, that's all you can do.
all you can do,
Yeah.
period. And educate the women.
Well, of course, I mean...
And the
there's-
children.
Yeah, I mean, what we should be we're doing is partnering with the education ministry. There's a lot of things we can be doing from a non-military point of view, my God. And there's a lot of things that we could be doing that don't cost all that much either. I mean, people think it doesn't actually have to be that expensive a proposition.
Like what? Build schools?
Well, sure, I
water.
mean, provide basic infrastructure. What the Afghans want is the rule of law. They want some security. They want to know that they can set up a stall in the marketplace without having to pay a bribe. They need to have the judiciary strengthened. They need to have the parliamentary system more clearly constitutionally established and entrenched. We need to take a really, really firm line on elections, my God.
Well, that brings up Karzai.
Yeah.
So when we come back, tell me your views on Karzai, and we'll continue to talk about Come From the Shadows, the long and lonely struggle for peace in Afghanistan with Terry Glavin.